For African nations to prosper, and for Africa to achieve the development envisioned for the future and encapsulated in Agenda 2063, countries must implement democratic value and governance practices so as to ensure that all citizens enjoy the freedoms enshrined in law and recognized within the principles of universal human rights and have equitable access to all resources, including justice and the rule of law, so that they can thrive and live their lives to the fullest potential. The vision for an Africa whose development is premised on good governance, where there is respect for human rights, justice and the rule of law, is founded on the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, which recognizes that development cannot be disassociated from civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights, and all these rights must be present for societies to grow. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights was born out of the realization that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights failed to adequately address the human rights needs and issues on the African continent, and more significantly, address the injustices inflicted during colonial rule or even apartheid. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which was adopted by the Organization of African Unity in 1981, sought to provide African states with supranational accountability with the establishment of its own regional human rights instrument.
Well, Africa as a continent, before the adoption of the African Charter on Human Rights, we had the Universal Declaration and other relevant instruments that were universal and global in nature. But you can see that the Charter itself, even the name of the Charter actually tells you that there's a need for Africa to have its own, because it's a Charter on human and people's rights. Because in the continent in Africa, it's not only about the individual. We are a family and a community. So we have individual rights and we also have communal and people's rights. And the Charter itself actually takes into consideration the unique and specific context of Africa and Africans as a group. So it is very important that we have our own instrument that speaks to the needs of Africa as a continent and its citizens.
Historically, Africa had been under colonization, and in the end, in the early 70s, the Organization of African Union came together to consider how newly elected African leaders would now treat their own citizens.
Vous voyez, nous avons une organisation qui est portée aujourd'hui sur des objectifs de développement, mais également les objectifs de développement sont articulés à des objectifs de démocratie, de respect des droits humains. Et pour cela, il fallait le matérialiser par un texte qui est spécifique, qui appartient à l'Afrique de façon spécifique. Parce que on ne va pas se voiler la face. Il y a des spécificités africaines qui doivent être prises en compte. Et cela ne peut se faire que dans le cadre d'un texte strictement africain. Il était pertinent pour notre continent d'avoir une charte qui est propre, malgré le fait qu'on ait des instruments internationaux. Ouais. Donc c'est pour vous dire, franchement, c'était pour marquer notre résolue orientation à articuler les objectifs de développement de notre organisation continentale avec les préceptes de respect des droits humains, de démocratie et de bonne gouvernance.
Our continent may be one of the most progressive continents because not many other regions went ahead to look at this charter and try to domesticate it. And honestly, that's why the African Charter, which was adopted in 1981, is one of the oldest charters. In fact, even within the OAU and AU family. So what does it say? It says that this continent acknowledges that we do have challenges around human rights. We acknowledge. But we need a way and a space in which we as Africans address these issues.
And the issue of how independent states treat their own citizens didn't really receive the attention that it needed at the time. That's why we had at the time the Bakassa of Central African Republic, the Idi Amin of Uganda, and others who really did very terrible things on their own, people including here in Ethiopia, the Mengistu of this world. So the charter established for the first time that henceforth matters within the jurisdiction of independent states, particularly how they treat their citizens, becomes a concern for the entire continent by protecting and recognizing the protection of individual rights as well as collective rights of peoples.
The Charter covers rights such as the right to liberty and security, equal protection before the law, right of respect of human dignity and not to be subject to exploitation and degradation, particularly from slavery, torture, cruel, inhuman and degrading punishment, the right to receive information, freedom of conscience, the profession and free practice of religion, right to equal access to public service, the right to work under equitable and satisfactory conditions and to receive equal pay for work, and the right to education. Key to ensuring the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is implemented are the judicial, human rights and legal organs of the African Union, namely the African Union Commission on International Law, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, and principally the African Commission on Human and People's Rights.
La Commission africaine des droits de l'homme est un organe quasi-juridictionnel créé par la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et qu'il s'agit de la promotion et de la protection des droits reconnus aux citoyens dans tout le continent. Alors, au sein de la Commission, nous avons des mécanismes spéciaux qui s'occupent de questions particulières qui sont en lien direct avec le mandat de protection et de promotion confié à la Commission.
We cover various contemporary issues, for example, defending the rights of human rights defenders on the African continent, addressing issues relating to environment and human rights. We deal with issues relating to peace and security. We deal with issues relating to the rights of women on the continent because we have a dedicated special mechanism on those specific topics. We deal with issues relating to freedom of expression and access to information, as well as the rights of older persons and persons with disabilities. So we have all these various focus thematic areas and of course responsibilities for countries as well.
The Commission always has to recognize that it doesn't work alone in the area of human rights. There are a number of other human rights institutions within the African governance architecture that deal with the same matter. The African Court on Human and People's Rights, the Children's Committee, by way of example.
Le comité note que la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples a une nature et un mandat similaires. La Commission est un organe conventionnel créé pour surveiller la mise en œuvre du traité mère des droits de l'homme, la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Comme le comité, la Commission a également un caractère quasi-judiciaire et a des mandats similaires à ceux du comité. Les deux organes ont un rôle essentiel à jouer dans la promotion des droits de l'homme en général et des droits de l'enfant en particulier sur le continent. Notre continent a parcouru un long chemin en termes de respect des droits de l'homme et de l'enfant et a encore un long chemin à parcourir pour parvenir à une Afrique digne des droits de l'homme et de l'enfant.
The African Commission on Human and People's Rights this year bears the responsibility of being the chairperson of the African governance architecture. We are in this sense given a unique opportunity to lead the institutional coherence efforts of the Union by bringing together all institutions that are concerned with issues of human rights, governance, democracy in Africa.
The African Commission on Human and People's Rights is the oldest judicial and legal organ of the African Union and based in Banjul, the Gambia. The ACHPR Commission is charged with three major functions: promotion of human and people's rights, protection of human and people's rights, and the interpretation of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights.
L'interprétation de la charte, c'est tout ce que la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples fait dans son travail quotidien. En adoptant les observations générales, elle interprète la charte. En analysant les communications, l'interprétation de la charte, c'est un processus continu. Ce que je peux vous rassurer, c'est que dans toutes les compétences qui nous sont reconnues à l'article 45 de la charte, on ne fait pas autre chose qu'interpréter la charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples.
In interpreting and enforcing the provisions of the Charter, the Commission comprises of 11 members who are elected for a period of 6 years with an allocated special mechanism area of thematic focus for their specific role to promote and protect human rights across the continent.
Alors il faut savoir que la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples est un organe conventionnel qui a été concrétisé par la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. C'est donc une structure pseudo-juridictionnelle. Elle est composée de 11 commissaires. Elle a une structure permanente qui constitue le secrétariat et nous travaillons en symbiose entre le secrétariat et également les commissaires. Il y a 11 mandats thématiques et il y a également des mandats qui sont liés à des procédures internes de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Donc le renforcement de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme a évolué ces dernières années par le fait qu'il y a eu également une extension de nombreux mandats de manière à prendre en charge des questions émergentes telles qu'elles se présentent en Afrique.
The Commission also has, out of its 11 members, has 2 of its members appointed as a chairperson and a vice chairperson. The role of the chairperson and the vice chairperson together is that of the Bureau of the Commission. Their role is to coordinate the work of the 11 members and to ensure that the work of the Commission is done expeditiously and effectively.
Agenda 2063, Aspiration 3, recognizes respect for human rights, good governance and democracy as building blocks for the continent, offering many convergent themes to the work of the Commission, including pathways to enhance legal and economic rights and building sustained peace throughout the continent.
In promoting and protecting economic and social and cultural rights, so much so that it has to fit into the global picture of the Agenda 2063. Economic rights are rights which pertain to issues that are going to assist the ordinary African achieve or attain certain economic benefits. What we've been doing mostly is that we have been concentrating literally on civil and political rights, and to a large extent, social and economic and cultural rights have been relegated to backstage. So the primary purpose of our working group is to ensure that the economic, social and cultural rights take center stage.
You do realize that corruption comes in the way of attaining human rights in their different forms, whether it be political rights, it can be social, economic and cultural rights. If corruption is allowed to fester in any country, it means people cannot freely access their human rights. And when you look at the convention, our convention, it also calls upon us to be able to form partnerships with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Let me give an example. The right to health, when you go to the hospital, are you attended to without you having to pay anything extra, and all those things. So in a nutshell, that's how the board operates and how the convergence with the African Commission comes in.
The African Union has expressed in its Agenda 2063 a long-term roadmap for Africa. And in this respect, all organs of the Union, of which the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is one, contribute to that strategic objective.
Em relação à sua interseção com a Agenda 2063, neste momento a Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos trabalha com um plano quinquenal que tem foco nas metas e nas previsões da Agenda 2063. Os mesmos objetivos que são perseguidos pela Agenda 2063 são também implementados e de acordo com o mandato da Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos.
Given the fact that Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, speaks of the aspiration 3, the good governance that respects the respect for human rights, at the same time, a peaceful, in aspiration 4, a peaceful and secure continent. So they are linked, they are mutually reinforcing and guarantees the full protection, promotion, the safeguard, the defense of human and people's rights.
L'agenda 2063, c'est l'horizon vers lequel nous partons tous. Et la Commission africaine est en train de fournir pas mal d'efforts pour que cet agenda 2063, l'Afrique que nous voulons, puisse être quelque chose qui va être concrétisé. Je veux dire quoi concrètement? C'est que cette Afrique que nous voulons, il dépend en grande partie de ce que la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, un peu la Cour également, est en train de faire pour l'instant. Si nous ne faisons pas attention, si nous ne travaillons pas correctement dans le domaine de la promotion, si nous ne travaillons pas correctement dans le domaine de la protection des droits de l'homme et des peuples, l'agenda 2063 de l'Afrique que nous voulons sera un vœu pieux.
With the Charter being established 4 decades previously, the Commission's mandate and work has had to evolve to tackle contemporary human rights challenges on the continent today, such as deadly militarization of pandemic responses, the shrinking of civil and political spaces, forging legal frameworks on the abolition of the death penalty, and strengthening the responsibility to protect all Africans against extrajudicial killings or even genocide.
Initially, much of the focus was in having the rights enshrined in the Charter getting accepted. So building, if you like, a constituency for the rights in the African Charter. Indeed, building, so to speak, a community of practice of human rights on the African continent. Over the years, in response to various developments on the continent, for example, in response to what happened in Rwanda in 1994, in response to that, the Commission, for example, came to establish a rapporteur on the right to life and prevention of extrajudicial killings and executions. That was, part of the evolution of the Commission.
In case of violation, of gross violation of human rights, in case of genocide or war crimes, the African Union stands out as the only intergovernmental body where its member states can decide to intervene in a country, in a member state that has seemed to have violated human rights. That is the gamut of the whole essence of the Charter. So with the various commissions, with the various institutions that now protect and promote these rights, first the Banjul Commission, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and the African Court based in Arusha, the African Union member states have demonstrated their full commitment to these rights that are enshrined in their normative frameworks.
Le charte protège le droit à la vie. Dans son article 4, la charte africaine des droits de l'homme protège le droit à la vie. Et le droit à la vie est intimement lié avec l'abolition de la peine de mort. L'objectif aujourd'hui, la doctrine de la Commission sur cette question, c'est de faire en sorte que partout sur le continent, qu'on ait une abolition totale de la peine de mort. Parce que nous considérons que la vie est sacrée et qu'elle doit être préservée de tous les citoyens. Ça, c'est l'objectif. Nous y travaillons. Et si vous vous reportez aux statistiques, vous verrez qu'aujourd'hui, l'Afrique est dans une dynamique abolitionniste. Parce qu'à l'heure où nous parlons, déjà, il y a 26 États africains qui ont totalement aboli la peine de mort pour tous les pays.
So the Charter covers at the moment its priority areas obviously are, again, expanding incrementally the culture of respect for and protection of human rights on the continent through promoting compliance by states with the standards of the Charter.
So what exact processes, mechanisms and instruments does the Commission have at its disposal in order to support governments in the implementation of the Charter or even to hold parties to account? A state reporting mechanism requires states to provide a biannual report on the implementation on various provisions of the Charter. The country rapporteurship mechanism has each commissioner personally allocated a number of countries for continual monitoring and key assessments. The issuing of resolutions as authoritative public statements on the status or progress relating to the Charter, general comments on interpreting the mandate of the Charter to member states, and field missions, where engagement of all stakeholders on salient human rights issues can be undertaken.
Broadly speaking, obviously our principal instrument, one has to do with persuasion. We have to engage in advocacy and campaign in order to press upon states and persuade them so that they live up to the standards that they have committed under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And these persuasive engagements take the form of, it can be diplomatic initiatives of various kinds, dialogue with member states, sending various communications in order to draw their attention to things that we would like to get done. We also have what we consider to be mobilization of public opinion, which is also critical in terms of really shedding light on some of the worst manifestations of human rights violations. So if states fail to comply with those decisions, there are measures that are to be taken, but it's not us who take those measures of enforcement. It is the African Union Assembly, or through delegation, the Council of Ministers, the Executive Council of the African Union.
The African Commission on Human and People's Rights work has many areas of convergence within the African governance architecture and other legal frameworks to realize the rights for all women through the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa. The Charter on the Rights of Women in Africa, also known as the Maputo Protocol, is in response to Article 18 of the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, which calls on states to eliminate every discrimination against women and to ensure the protection of the rights of women as stipulated in international declarations and conventions. In its work, the Commission works closely with the Women, Gender and Youth Directorate of the African Union Commission to improve the status of women and girls on the continent by advocating for key issues such as economic empowerment and financial inclusion, promoting the right to education for women and girls, and ending child marriage and harmful cultural practices such as female genital mutilation.
One of the things we do when we do gender analysis is we identify for every problem. We look at where the women are and where girls are and where men are and where boys are. Then once we know where they are, if they are at the bottom of the ladder, the next thing we try to do is look for reasons why there is that disparity. And then we develop mechanisms to make sure that women are able to move up the ladder to where men are.
Women's rights are part of human rights. Every issue that we have to deal with within the continent, we find that women are always in the forefront. We talk about poverty, we're told that poverty has the face of a woman. We talk about rights violation, domestic violence, gender-based violence. These are things that disproportionately affect women. So our mechanism as a special rapporteur on the rights of women is very crucial in that to ensure that we encourage member states, we test them to ensure that they will ratify, implement, and at the national level also, it has impact on the life of women within the continent. We actually interrogate and ensure that we interact with the states, and we ask specific questions relating to the specific articles of the Maputo Protocol in terms of implementation, what are the outstanding issues, and then we have concluding observation that we use to actually direct the states to ensure that there's implementation of these instruments at the national level.
The Commission's work also undertakes to uphold the rights of refugees and internally displaced people, the rights of older persons and the rights of persons with disabilities.
Dans le cadre de la promotion des droits de l'homme, la Commission organise et effectue des missions de promotion, des missions d'établissement des faits auprès des États, sur autorisation de ces États bien sûr. Et dans le cadre du mandat de protection, lorsque la Commission reçoit des plaintes dirigées contre des États, elle saisit les États de ces plaintes-là pour les informer afin d'avoir le retour des États. Et plus particulièrement, dans le cadre du mécanisme que je préside, le groupe de travail sur les droits des personnes âgées et des personnes handicapées, la Commission a piloté le processus de rédaction des 2 protocoles qui protègent ces 2 catégories vulnérables. Et en ce moment, nous sommes en cours de ratification. Il reste les personnes âgées et les personnes handicapées. Donc la Commission se tourne vers les États pour que la boucle de protection de toutes les personnes vulnérables de la Charte africaine soit bouclée.
The African Charter on Human and People's Rights is a historically grounded human rights instrument that affords legal obligations to individuals and the state, and has also contributed widely to the recognition of the legitimacy of civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and even political opposition. As Africa marches towards its economic and political ambitions envisioned in Agenda 2063, the need to address challenges and to uphold human rights principles on the continent as enshrined in the Charter will remain a crucible of the African Commission's work to deliver for all its citizens.
One thing that we can celebrate as a Commission is that at least we've been able to ensure that there's visibility with regard to rights emanating from the Charter and the Protocol. And member states now pay attention to the work we do. They attend our sessions, but beyond that also they've taken their reporting obligation very serious, although we're still calling on more member states to report because we're there to ensure that human rights of the citizens of the continent are taken into consideration, are realized, are protected and promoted.
And therefore today we have reached a point where there is no debate about whether or not Africans are entitled to and therefore deserved of human rights. There is no debate about that, all right? So human rights are accepted and recognized as legitimate interests worthy of protection and respect for Africans as a family of human beings.